Do you feel like your past is running your life? Like every mistake, every argument, or every moment that hurt you is still pulling your thoughts, your energy, and your mood? Most people don't even notice how much weight they carry from yesterday, how much it affects how they speak, how they act, and how they see themselves. What if you could stop that? What if you could wake up feeling lighter, calmer, and actually free to focus on what matters right now? The truth is, letting go isn't about forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It's about taking back control, calming your mind, and finally giving yourself permission to move forward. In this video, you'll discover practical steps to release pain, stop replaying the past, forgive yourself, and stop letting yesterday steal today. By the end, you'll see that peace, clarity, and focus aren't distant ideas. They can be part of your life right now. Chapter: Stop feeding memories that keep reopening emotional wounds. Pain lives where attention stays. Every day, people carry memories that replay in their minds, replaying conversations, mistakes, losses, and regrets. These memories do not serve the present moment. They do not help with today's problems. They only keep the past alive in ways that drain energy and blur focus. The mind revisits the same scenes because it believes understanding comes from repetition. The heart tightens each time, the stomach knots, and the body reacts as if the event is still unfolding. Emotional energy is spent fighting battles that no longer exist. This is a natural human response, but it becomes a habit, and habits shape life more than intentions ever do. Awareness of this pattern is the first step toward freedom. Feeding painful memories becomes a daily routine for many. They wake up thinking about what went wrong yesterday or last year. They replay conversations that ended badly. They imagine better responses to situations that cannot be changed. The mind thinks it is processing, but often it is simply prolonging suffering. Attention given to these memories strengthens them. They grow in intensity, influence, and weight. People forget that memory is a tool, not a prison. Memory can teach, but when left unchecked, it keeps the nervous system in a state of tension. The chest may feel tight, the shoulders heavy, and sleep may suffer. The body does not distinguish between a present threat and a recalled threat. The mind signals danger, the body responds, and life becomes exhausting. The key to stopping this pattern is choice. Not every thought requires attention. Not every memory needs to be revisited. There is power in deciding which memories deserve your presence and which should remain in the past. Choice is the foundation of emotional maturity. It is not denial or suppression. It is deliberate allocation of energy. When attention is focused on what matters now, energy becomes productive. When attention lingers on old wounds, energy becomes toxic. The brain learns from repetition. Whatever is repeated becomes the standard. Repeating pain creates more pain. Repeating gratitude and productive reflection creates more clarity and stability. Understanding this is critical for anyone seeking growth. A mind trained to replay old hurt cannot fully engage in the present. Relationships suffer because attention is divided. Work suffers because focus is incomplete. Self-perception suffers because the brain interprets old failures as ongoing deficits. Many people carry invisible burdens that others do not see. They are exhausted, not because of tasks, but because of emotional replay. Each time an argument is reimagined or a past mistake revisited, stress hormones spike. Cortisol rises, tension builds, and the body adapts to expect danger. Over time, chronic tension develops. Emotional fatigue becomes a permanent state. Life feels heavier than it should because the past occupies the present. Stopping this habit begins with noticing it. Awareness is the first act of freedom. Observe when the mind drifts toward an old memory that brings discomfort. Notice the sensations in the body, the tightening, the racing heartbeat, the shallow breathing. Recognize that these signals indicate that a memory is taking control, not reality. This recognition separates the observer from the reaction. It creates a space between thought and response. In that space lies choice. In that space lies power. Next is interruption. When a painful memory arises, it is not enough to acknowledge it. Active intervention is necessary. Redirect attention physically or mentally. Stand up, move. Engage the senses in the present. Touch something solid. Listen to surrounding sounds. Smell something real. Feel the ground under your feet. These actions anchor awareness in the current moment. They signal to the nervous system that threat is absent. The memory may linger, but it no longer dominates. Repetition of this practice strengthens neural pathways that favor presence over rumination. Replacement is the next principle. Simply stopping a thought without replacing it leaves a void. The mind will naturally seek to return to what is familiar. Choose constructive replacement. Engage in tasks that demand focus. Read, write, exercise, plan, connect with people in meaningful ways. These replacements provide mental space for growth rather than stagnation. Over time, the brain adapts. It learns to associate energy with productive action rather than re-experiencing old pain. Forgiveness is also critical. Forgiving others and yourself is not about condoning past wrongs. It is about releasing their power to occupy your mind. When grudges are held, memory is fed. Every recollection strengthens the emotional charge. Forgiveness weakens that charge. It does not erase events, but it diminishes their impact. Emotional freedom grows as a result. Self-forgiveness is particularly important. People often replay mistakes endlessly, punishing themselves silently. Releasing this self-criticism allows focus to shift from blame to improvement. Another factor is perspective. People often exaggerate the importance of past events when viewed in the mind repeatedly. Memory becomes distorted. Pain grows. Observing memories with objective awareness helps minimize their influence. Ask whether the event truly matters today. Ask whether continued attention improves life. If the answer is no, energy should be redirected. Perspective is learned through consistent reflection. It grows stronger as the habit of selective attention strengthens. Daily practice consolidates these principles. Awareness, interruption, replacement, forgiveness, and perspective must be applied consistently. Each day offers multiple opportunities to reinforce this skill. Morning routines can include reflection on what memories require attention and which do not. During the day, notice moments when emotional energy drifts toward old pain. Use physical or mental interventions to regain presence. At night, review the day and note instances of progress. Recognize how often peace was maintained instead of replaying pain. Growth is incremental. Each small act of control accumulates into significant improvement. The benefits are measurable. Emotional energy stabilizes. Sleep improves. Stress decreases. Focus strengthens. Relationships become more present. People respond positively when attention is full, not divided. Decisions are made with clarity rather than clouded by old grievances. Productivity increases because mental resources are applied to current challenges. Self-esteem grows because the brain interprets mastery over attention as competent. Emotional resilience is strengthened as life continues to challenge. It is also important to accept that memories will resurface. Stopping the habit does not erase memory. Intrusive thoughts are natural. What matters is the response. Repeated intentional redirection diminishes their impact. Each time the mind attempts to feed an old wound and attention is shifted, the pathway grows weaker, control strengthens. Over time, emotional independence develops. The person learns to experience events without being dominated by them. The past remains a record, not a ruler of the present. In addition, gratitude can reinforce this practice. Focus on elements of life that bring value, joy, and meaning. Positive attention occupies the mind, leaving less space for harmful rumination. Gratitude does not negate memory. It balances attention toward what serves well-being. Neural pathways that focus on positive experiences grow stronger through repetition.
Emotional stability increases. Mental clarity improves. Community and accountability also support growth. Discussing experiences with supportive individuals prevents isolation and excessive mental replay. Others can provide perspective, challenge distortions, and reinforce present-focused thinking. The presence of empathetic listeners strengthens the habit of controlled attention. Social reinforcement encourages persistence. Emotional freedom becomes easier to maintain when it is practiced alongside guidance and encouragement. Physical health complements mental control. Exercise reduces tension in the nervous system. Breathwork stabilizes emotional response. Sleep allows processing without rumination. A body aligned with mental intent supports the practice of stopping the feeding of old wounds. Neglecting physical health undermines mental progress. Energy drains faster. Emotional triggers are heightened, and resilience weakens. Finally, understand the long-term consequences of failing to practice. Memories that are continuously fed grow into patterns of suffering. They define identity, shape perception, and limit potential. Life becomes reactive rather than proactive. Opportunities are missed because energy is wasted on events that cannot be changed. Mental fatigue accumulates. Emotional capacity diminishes. Healing is delayed. Mastery over memory is not optional. It is essential for a life that is fully lived. In conclusion, stopping the feeding of memories that reopen emotional wounds is a deliberate, multi-step process, grounded in awareness, interruption, replacement, forgiveness, perspective, gratitude, community, and physical care. It requires commitment and practice. The process begins with simple recognition. Not every memory deserves attention. Through repeated practice, mental strength grows, emotional energy stabilizes, and the present moment becomes accessible. Freedom is experienced not through erasure of the past but through control over attention. Peace, clarity, and productivity emerge. Life becomes lighter, sharper, and more purposeful. Each day spent mastering this skill is a day reclaimed from the hold of past pain. Mastery begins now with each choice to redirect, release, and focus on the life that is unfolding in front of you. The past becomes a teacher, not a burden, and the mind learns that attention determines reality more than memory ever can.
Chapter 2. Choose peace when your mind begs to fight. Conflict is one of the heaviest burdens a person can carry, yet most people do not recognize it until the damage is done. Every day the mind searches for battles, even when there is no real threat. A word is misheard, a glance is misinterpreted, or an expectation is not met, and suddenly the body is tense, the jaw tight, and the chest constricted. Thoughts race with arguments, defenses, and strategies for proving rightness. People often mistake these responses for strength or passion, but the truth is that constant readiness to fight erodes energy, distorts judgment, and diminishes satisfaction. Choosing peace when the mind wants to fight is not weakness. It is one of the most powerful forms of self-control and personal mastery a person can develop. When the mind demands confrontation, it is often reacting to perceived threats to pride, reputation, or personal comfort. These threats are rarely as immediate or significant as the brain imagines, yet the body reacts as though they are. Muscles tighten, the heart beats faster, and breathing becomes shallow. Hormones surge, preparing for action that may never be necessary. This stress takes a toll over time. Emotional tension becomes habitual, leaving people exhausted and reactive. They respond to minor frustrations as if they are life-threatening crises. The mind confuses agitation with importance, but in reality, most arguments are fleeting and leave no lasting benefit. Choosing peace begins with awareness. Notice the moment the urge to fight rises. Observe the sensations in the body. The tension in the shoulders, the clenching of the jaw, the rapid pulse, and the tightening of the stomach are all signals, not commands. They indicate that the body is preparing to react, not that reaction is required. Awareness creates the space needed to make a conscious decision, rather than act impulsively. This space is the foundation of self-mastery. It allows a person to step back and assess whether the response will contribute to life or detract from it. One of the most effective strategies is to slow down before responding. Pausing creates the opportunity to evaluate the situation logically instead of emotionally. People often feel compelled to react immediately because the mind equates delay with weakness. In truth, deliberate restraint is a sign of strength and intelligence. A calm response prevents unnecessary conflict and preserves mental clarity. It also reduces the chances of saying something that could cause regret. Time is a powerful tool for emotional regulation. It is important to distinguish between peace and passivity. Choosing peace does not mean ignoring problems or allowing mistreatment. It means approaching challenges with intentionality. It means addressing issues without letting anger or frustration control decisions. Calm communication often produces better outcomes than reactive arguments. When people remain centered, they think more clearly, speak more effectively, and solve problems faster. Peace is an active choice that requires courage and discipline. Daily life offers numerous opportunities to practice this skill. Traffic jams, workplace disagreements, family misunderstandings, and social media arguments all provide tests of patience and self-control. The mind automatically wants to react, defend, or assert. Each situation presents a choice: surrender to reaction or assert control through calm. Choosing peace repeatedly strengthens neural pathways that support measured responses. Over time, calmness becomes the default response, and stress decreases. People often mistake emotional intensity for power. They believe that expressing anger or frustration demonstrates strength or leadership. In reality, uncontrolled reactions signal vulnerability and lack of control. True strength is demonstrated by the ability to remain composed in the face of provocation. Composure allows better decision-making, preserves relationships, and maintains emotional energy. People respect calm more than aggression. Calm creates authority without the need to dominate or intimidate. Another critical aspect is understanding the cost of fighting. Every argument drains energy that could be used to improve life. Emotional energy is finite. Once it is spent on unproductive conflicts, less is available for creativity, learning, or meaningful connection. Sleep is affected, stress accumulates, and decision-making suffers. Over time, a pattern of constant conflict leads to exhaustion, resentment, and reduced life satisfaction. Choosing peace protects energy and allows it to be directed toward growth and purpose. Internal dialogue plays a crucial role. The mind will often rationalize arguments, providing endless reasons to engage. It may remind of past grievances or predict future offenses. Awareness of this internal chatter is necessary. Not every thought requires action. Thoughts can be observed without being acted upon. Reframing mental narratives helps shift focus from confrontation to resolution. Practice in noticing and redirecting these thoughts strengthens emotional resilience. Physical techniques can assist in maintaining peace. Deep breathing slows the heart rate and reduces tension in muscle. Movement, even short walks, dissipate stress hormones. Grounding exercises, such as noticing sensory input in the environment, help the mind stay in the present. The body and mind are interconnected. Managing physical response supports emotional control. When the body is calm, the mind finds it easier to maintain clarity and perspective. Setting boundaries is another essential practice. Choosing peace does not mean tolerating abuse or disrespect. It means responding thoughtfully rather than reactively. Communicating limits clearly and calmly preserves dignity while maintaining composure. People who enforce boundaries with calmness often achieve better cooperation and respect than those who rely on aggressive confrontation. Boundaries protect peace without creating unnecessary conflict. Reflecting on priorities helps maintain perspective. Not every disagreement is worth engagement.
Evaluate whether an argument will have lasting significance or whether it will fade with time. Consider the emotional cost and potential consequence. Often, stepping back prevents unnecessary stress and preserves relationships. Long-term peace is more valuable than short-term victory. Understanding this allows a person to choose responses that align with goals and values rather than immediate emotional impulses. Gratitude reinforces this approach. Focusing on positive aspects of life diminishes the mind's fixation on perceived slights. When attention is on what is working, what is supportive, and what is meaningful, the urge to fight weakens. Gratitude shifts perspective from threat to appreciation, from agitation to calm. Regular practice strengthens resilience and emotional stability, making it easier to respond peacefully under pressure. Support systems contribute significantly. Engaging with individuals who model calm, measured responses provides examples and encouragement. Accountability from trusted friends or mentors reinforces discipline. Observing how others navigate conflict without losing composure provides practical strategies and inspiration. Learning from social models enhances the ability to internalize peaceful responses as default behaviors. Awareness of habitual triggers is crucial. Certain situations, people, or topics may consistently provoke reactive impulses. Recognizing these patterns allows preparation and strategic responses. Anticipating triggers reduces surprise and enhances control. Over time, habitual triggers lose their power as the mind develops skill in choosing calm over reaction. Patterns of peaceful response replace cycles of conflict, transforming daily experiences. The practice of choosing peace also develops empathy. When the mind pauses before reacting, there is space to consider the perspective of others. Understanding motives, limitations, and emotions of others reduces the impulse to argue. Empathy strengthens relationships and builds trust. Calm communication fosters cooperation and connection, rather than confrontation. People respond more positively to understanding than to hostility. Decision-making improves with sustained peace. Anger clouds judgment. Frustration narrows focus. Calm widens perception, allowing clearer assessment of situations. Choices made from composure are more strategic, measured, and effective. Long-term outcomes improve as energy is directed toward solutions rather than conflicts. Choosing peace aligns daily actions with broader goals, producing better results in life and work. Self-reflection strengthens commitment. Reviewing responses at the end of the day, noting successes and areas for improvement, reinforces learning. Celebrating instances of calm builds confidence. Recognizing when reactive impulses were avoided strengthens self-efficacy. Reflection consolidates the skill, ensuring continuous improvement. Growth is reinforced when awareness, practice, and feedback are combined. Peace becomes habitual through repetition. Each conscious decision to avoid unnecessary conflict rewires neural pathways. The brain learns that calmness is safe, productive, and rewarding. Over time, emotional regulation becomes automatic. Situations that once provoked tension now pass with minimal impact. Energy is preserved, focus is maintained, and quality of life improves. Persistence in these practices ensures long-term mastery of emotional responses. Choosing peace is transformative. It changes how a person experiences life, interacts with others, and perceives challenges. Conflicts become opportunities for growth rather than sources of distress. Stress diminishes and resilience increases. Relationships thrive as interactions become more constructive. Clarity of thought allows better decisions. Health improves as chronic tension and stress are reduced. Life becomes more manageable, focused, and fulfilling. Choosing peace is not a single act, it is a way of living. Applied consistently, intentionally, and consciously. Awareness, Pause, perspective, physical management, boundaries, gratitude, empathy, and reflection together create a framework for choosing peace. Each element supports the other, producing a comprehensive approach to emotional mastery. The result is a mind capable of responding to life's challenges without succumbing to unnecessary conflict. Emotional energy is preserved. Mental clarity is maintained. Relationships flourish. Personal growth accelerates. The choice to remain peaceful is one of the most practical and powerful decisions a person can make, shaping the quality of every day and every interaction. Choosing peace when the mind wants to fight is not a one-time effort. It is a continuous commitment. The mind will repeatedly invite conflict, sometimes subtly, sometimes overtly. Each time a conscious decision reinforces new patterns. Over weeks and months, a life dominated by reactivity transforms into one guided by intentional calm. Experiences become clearer, interactions more meaningful, and satisfaction grows. Control over one's emotional state is reclaimed. Energy that was once lost to battles is redirected toward building, creating, and improving life. This discipline, practiced consistently, becomes a defining characteristic, shaping identity, outcomes, and long-term success.
Chapter 3. Release the need to be understood by everyone. People spend an incredible amount of their lives trying to make others understand them. From early childhood, we are trained to seek approval, to explain ourselves, to justify our actions. The world reinforces the belief that being understood is a measure of worth. When someone misunderstands us, it feels like a failure. When someone disagrees, it feels personal. The body tightens, the mind churns, and the heart beats faster. Emotional energy is consumed, trying to create alignment that may never happen. Most people do not realize how much of their life is dictated by the need for validation and comprehension from others. This need, unexamined, becomes a silent master, controlling thoughts, decisions, and moods without ever asking permission. The desire to be understood comes from a natural place. Humans are social creatures. We want to belong. We want our thoughts, feelings, and experiences to be acknowledged. Validation can be comforting, yet this desire turns into a trap when it is elevated above inner peace and personal clarity. The moment we require everyone to understand us, our emotional stability becomes dependent on external approval. This is an unstable foundation. People cannot control other minds. Every interaction carries ambiguity. Even the clearest explanation can be interpreted in countless ways. Expecting full comprehension from everyone is unrealistic, and insisting on it creates continuous disappointment. Releasing this need begins with awareness. Notice the situations that trigger it. Perhaps someone disagrees with you at work, challenges your opinion, or questions your motives. Notice the internal reaction, tension in the chest, rapid thoughts, or the urge to explain. Observe that these reactions exist because of the expectation that understanding is owed to you. Recognizing the pattern is the first step toward freedom. The mind will always provide reasons to defend yourself, but each defensive impulse is optional. Emotional choice lies in whether to act or to observe. Once aware, the next step is acceptance. Understand that people see the world differently. Their perspectives are shaped by experiences, beliefs, and fear. Someone's failure to understand you is not a reflection of your value, intelligence, or clarity. It reflects the limits of their perception. Accepting this truth removes the illusion that comprehension is guaranteed. Acceptance does not mean agreement or surrender. It is the calm acknowledgement that each mind operates independently and that trying to force understanding is unnecessary and exhausting. The body reacts to the release of this need with immediate relief. Shoulders relax, breathing deepens, and mental chatter quiet. Emotional energy is liberated, no longer spent defending or clarifying. People who insist on being understood often replay conversations internally, imagining responses, correcting misinterpretations, and anticipating judgments. This mental exercise is exhausting. Letting go of the need to be universally understood stops this cycle and frees attention for productive action. Energy once used to manage perceptions can now be invested in meaningful work, personal growth, and genuine connections. Setting boundaries supports this process. Release does not mean allowing disrespect or manipulation. It means deciding which interactions deserve emotional investment. When someone misunderstands you, you can correct with calm clarity, set limits, or choose to disengage. The focus shifts from proving yourself to preserving your well-being. Boundaries protect emotional energy and prevent the mind from being hijacked by others' inability or unwillingness to comprehend your perspective. Communication skills enhance the ability to release the need for universal understanding. Speak clearly, concisely, and assertively, but recognize that explanation is a tool, not a guarantee. You can offer information, context, and reasoning, but comprehension is ultimately a choice of the listener. Focusing on clarity without attachment to outcome allows for confident interaction. The energy is spent wisely, without draining over imagined judgments or misinterpretations. Internal validation is the cornerstone of this process. When self-worth is dependent on internal standards rather than external comprehension, the mind becomes resilient to misunderstanding. Evaluate success, morality, and personal growth based on personal criteria. When the internal compass guides judgment, the turbulence caused by others' opinions diminishes. Emotional freedom grows as the mind realizes it does not need consent to exist fully. Inner approval stabilizes mood, focus, and confidence. Mental reframing reinforces this freedom. When feeling misunderstood, consciously recognize the limits of human perception. Remind yourself that one person's inability to grasp your experience does not negate its reality. Shift focus from what is misperceived to what can be acted upon. Concentrate on solutions, goals, and constructive engagement rather than explanations. This shift prevents energy drain and maintains momentum in personal and professional life. Relationships improve when the need to be understood is released. Tension decreases because conversations no longer carry the weight of justification. Listening improves because attention is diverted from defending toward understanding others. Interactions become collaborative rather than adversarial. People respond more positively to those who are present, confident, and unburdened by defensiveness. Emotional space fosters empathy and authentic connection, enhancing trust and communication. Reflection strengthens the habit of release. At the end of each day, review moments when the urge to be understood arose. Assess the response. Did it conserve energy or feed tension? Did it maintain peace or escalate stress? Recognize successes and areas for improvement without self-criticism. Reflection consolidates learning, reinforcing the mental pathways that support emotional independence and intentional focus. Practicing mindfulness amplifies release. Moment-to-moment awareness allows observation of impulses to justify, explain, or correct. Mindfulness creates a buffer between stimulus and reaction, making choice possible. The mind notices misunderstanding without reacting destructively. Emotional regulation becomes automatic with consistent practice. Mental calm becomes a default state rather than an effortful intervention. The mind no longer obsessively monitors perception and approval. Gratitude reinforces resilience to misunderstanding. By focusing on aspects of life that bring value, satisfaction, and connection, attention is diverted from perceived slight. Gratitude occupies space that would otherwise be taken by defensive energy. Positive reinforcement strengthens neural pathways associated with calm, appreciation, and internal validation. Mental clarity improves as emotional clutter diminishes. Physical practices complement mental release. Breath control, posture alignment,
and regular exercise reduce the physiological responses associated with perceived threats. The body's relaxation supports mental calm when tension in muscles and rapid heartbeat are managed. Emotional impulses are easier to regulate. Physical and mental states reinforce one another, creating stability in the face of misunderstanding. Understanding priorities supports selective engagement. Not all opinions or judgments require attention. Assess whether interaction contributes to goals, growth, or well-being. Many disagreements are trivial, temporary, or inconsequential. Energy is preserved by consciously choosing when to invest attention and when to disengage. Focus shifts from validation seeking to value creating, producing tangible progress in life. Patience is integral to releasing the need to be understood. Habits of seeking comprehension are deeply ingrained. The mind will repeatedly invite justification, correction, or explanation. Each time, a conscious choice to remain present and centered strengthens the new habit. Consistent application over weeks and months rewires response patterns, gradually reducing anxiety and reactivity related to misunderstanding. Emotional self-reliance emerges from consistent practice. The mind becomes less influenced by external judgments. Confidence in decisions and actions strengthens. Stress decreases as the compulsion to defend or justify diminishes. Mental clarity improves, allowing better decision-making. Life becomes more manageable, focused, and satisfying. Independence from external validation supports growth in professional, personal, and relational domains. Social observation provides additional reinforcement. Notice individuals who operate without the need for universal understanding. Observe the stability, confidence, and calm in their presence. Their clarity stems from internal grounding, not external validation. Modeling this behavior informs personal practice and accelerates mastery of emotional independence. Observational learning enhances understanding of practical application in real-world situations. Accepting imperfection in others reinforces freedom. People cannot always understand intentions, context, or experiences. Attempting to force comprehension is futile. Energy spent on persuasion often outweighs the benefits. Recognition of human limitations allows for compassion without attachment. Peace is preserved as the mind disengages from unproductive efforts to control perception. Strategic communication supports release. When explanation is necessary, provide it calmly, succinctly, and without attachment to result. The goal is clarity, not validation. Detachment from outcome maintains emotional energy. The mind practices offering information without engaging in emotional bargaining. Over time, this skill strengthens confidence and reduces susceptibility to stress caused by misunderstanding. Long-term benefits include resilience, focus, and well-being. Energy previously lost to defensiveness is redirected toward constructive action. Stress decreases, relationships improve, decision-making strengthens. Emotional independence allows a person to navigate life with confidence, calm, and clarity. The habit of seeking comprehension is replaced by the habit of self-guided attention, producing sustainable emotional stability. Releasing the need to be understood is not instantaneous. It requires continuous awareness, practice, and reflection. Each interaction, thought, or reaction presents an opportunity to reinforce the habit. Progress accumulates through repetition, patience, and conscious application. Mastery emerges as internal validation replaces external dependence, producing consistent mental clarity, emotional energy, and life satisfaction. Ultimately, freedom from the need to be universally understood empowers choice, focus, and peace. Energy once consumed by defensiveness is redirected toward growth, achievement, and meaningful connection. Emotional independence allows presence, clarity, and calm in interactions. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. The mind experiences stability, and the body responds with relaxed energy. By releasing the compulsion to be understood, A person gains control over their emotional world, creating space for focus, creativity, and purposeful living.
Chapter 4. Accept loss without turning it into lifelong punishment. Loss is a part of life that everyone will face, yet most people treat it as a catastrophe to carry forever. The end of a relationship, the loss of a job, the death of someone loved, or even a failed dream, triggers an intense response in the mind and body. The heart tightens, the chest aches, and thoughts spiral into why me, or this should not have happened. It is natural to feel pain, yet the moment pain is prolonged unnecessarily, it transforms into punishment. People often replay losses endlessly, blaming themselves or others, imagining different outcomes, or reliving the event in vivid detail. This mental repetition transforms a single moment into a lifetime of suffering. The tragedy is not the loss itself, it is the mind's unwillingness to release it. Understanding the nature of loss is crucial. Loss is final in its occurrence, but not in its meaning. People confuse permanence in circumstance with permanence in emotion. A lost job does not mean a lost life. A broken relationship does not mean the heart can never love again. Yet, the mind tends to exaggerate, creating chains of consequence that stretch far beyond reality. The mind predicts endless suffering, even when the loss is a singular event. The body responds accordingly. Sleep becomes restless, appetite changes, energy diminishes, and motivation fades. Physical health suffers as emotional energy is trapped in repetitive thought cycles. Acceptance begins with recognition. Notice the loss as it exists. Acknowledge what has ended without layering judgment, guilt, or imagined scenarios on top of it. People often distort reality with if-only statements. These statements keep the mind in limbo, living in events that no longer exist. Observation without embellishment is the first step toward release. Accept that the event happened. Accept the emotions. Acceptance does not erase the pain, but it prevents the escalation of grief into a lifelong burden. Recognition allows the mind to separate fact from interpretation, reality from projection. Once awareness is present, the next step is detachment from blame. Blame prolongs suffering. People who dwell on loss often assign fault to themselves, to others, to circumstances. Every accusation, justified or not, is mental fuel. Holding on to fault transforms the loss into an ongoing punishment because it keeps attention tethered to the event. Detachment does not mean ignoring lessons or avoiding responsibility. It means understanding that blaming endlessly does not change the past. Energy spent on blame is energy stolen from rebuilding and growth. Reflection is necessary, but must be brief and strategic. Analyze what the loss teaches without lingering in regret. Consider decisions, actions, and patterns that contributed to the outcome. Extract lessons, then move forward. Many people replay losses without gaining insight. They memorize mistakes but refuse to implement change. Reflection without action is stagnation. Action channels understanding into practical steps that improve life, preventing loss from becoming a lifelong trap. Each step forward weakens the power of the past to control the present. Emotional regulation is key to avoiding prolonged punishment. The mind's natural response is emotional escalation. Anxiety, sadness, frustration, and anger amplify the experience of loss. Allowing these feelings to dominate prolongs suffering. Observe emotion as it arises, label it, understand it, then guide attention to constructive engagement. Emotional energy is finite. Spending it on unending grief prevents its use in growth, problem solving, and new experiences. Emotional regulation is not suppression. It is disciplined direction of energy toward life, rather than perpetual punishment. Physical presence supports mental acceptance. Movement, exercise, and even simple changes in environment interrupt cycles of rumination. The body stores tension from unprocessed loss, muscles tighten, posture shifts, and energy is constrained. Activity releases stored stress, clarifies thinking, and restores resilience. Grounding exercises, awareness of breath, and sensory focus allow the body to signal safety. When the body relaxes, the mind follows, reducing the tendency to dwell endlessly on what has been lost. Perspective reshapes experience. Loss is often viewed as absolute failure, but every loss is part of a larger life trajectory. One closed door opens another. Every ending carries lessons and opportunities for growth. Perspective allows the mind to see loss as part of a dynamic system of experience, rather than a permanent condemnation. When perspective is applied consistently, the weight of past events diminishes, and attention shifts to present and future possibility. Perspective transforms perception, turning pain into clarity instead of punishment. Boundaries and personal limits assist in recovery. People who have experienced loss often face external pressures to explain, justify, or recover in ways that suit others. Maintaining boundaries preserves the internal space necessary for acceptance. Protecting attention from unnecessary commentary, opinions, or interference allows focus on personal processing and constructive action. Boundaries prevent loss from becoming a public drama or an extended punishment fueled by external noise. Gratitude strengthens resilience to loss. While it may seem impossible at first, identifying aspects of life that remain intact, supportive, or positive stabilizes the mind. Gratitude does not negate grief. It balances focus. When attention is divided between what is gone and what remains valuable, emotional energy is not monopolized by punishment. Gratitude amplifies resources for rebuilding, decision-making, and emotional recovery. Consistent practice reshapes neural patterns, making the mind less prone to endless rumination. Community and support networks accelerate recovery. Sharing experience with trusted individuals provides validation, perspective, and relief. Conversation that is supportive rather than directive prevents isolation and obsessive rumination. Witnessing others who have navigated similar losses reinforces the possibility of moving forward without turning pain into lifelong punishment. Social interaction provides a reality check, reducing mental distortions that exaggerate suffering and extending energy toward healing rather than repetition of past events. Mindful practices enhance the process. Awareness of thought patterns, bodily responses, and emotional triggers allows strategic intervention. Noticing impulses to replay the loss and consciously redirecting attention interrupts cycles of punishment. Meditation, journaling, or reflective observation strengthens the habit of separating emotion from memory. Mindfulness trains the mind to engage with reality rather than construction of exaggerated grief. Repeated application produces a mind capable of acknowledging loss without becoming enslaved by it. Time is a critical factor in healing. People often expect immediate recovery and become frustrated when emotional energy remains disrupted. Understanding that acceptance and release are processes prevents self-criticism and impatience. Recovery occurs in incremental steps, with progress observable in energy levels, clarity, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Each day of deliberate attention to acceptance builds momentum and diminishes the habit of converting loss into punishment. Patience is a tool for sustaining this practice over time. Learning to redefine identity following loss is essential. People often anchor self-perception to circumstances, relationships, or positions lost. When these are removed, identity feels shattered. Rebuilding identity based on internal values, abilities, and intentions, rather than external conditions, stabilizes self-esteem. Identity anchored in personal competence, rather than loss, ensures that setbacks do not define a lifetime,
and that emotional energy can be directed to creation rather than fixation. Decision-making benefits from accepting loss without punishment. Reactive decisions made in the shadow of unprocessed grief often compound difficulties. Calm reflection, guided by awareness and perspective, produces choices aligned with long-term goals. Opportunities previously clouded by emotional fixation become visible. Energy formerly consumed by mental punishment is now available for problem-solving, planning and action. Acceptance enhances agency and competence, producing measurable improvement in life outcomes. Visualization can reinforce acceptance. Mentally rehearsing responses to loss that do not include self-punishment trains the mind for practical reality. Imagine moving forward, taking steps and acting with clarity while acknowledging grief without exaggerating it. Rehearsal strengthens neural pathways that support emotional regulation, enabling the mind to respond effectively in real situations rather than defaulting to habitual rumination and punishment. Self-compassion is central to sustained release. People often internalize loss as personal failure. Self-criticism prolongs suffering and entrenches punishment. Adopting a compassionate internal dialogue allows recognition of limitations, mistakes, and vulnerability without unnecessary harshness. Compassion transforms perception of loss, reducing its emotional footprint and increasing resilience. The practice strengthens emotional stamina, allowing clearer thinking and proactive engagement with life. Long-term practice transforms relationship with loss. Initial responses are intense, but repeated application of awareness, reflection, perspective, gratitude, mindfulness, community support and self-compassion shifts habitual patterns. Loss no longer triggers automatic cycles of punishment. Emotional energy stabilizes, decision-making improves, and daily life regains balance. The mind develops confidence in its ability to process setbacks without being enslaved by them. Acceptance also involves letting go of imagined consequence. People often inflate the significance of loss, creating narratives of catastrophe that extend into the future. These imagined outcomes amplify fear and immobilize action. Consciously recognizing that future suffering is not inevitable and redirecting attention to present circumstances diminishes the power of imagined punishment. Reality, not conjecture, becomes the primary frame for Finally, releasing loss without lifelong punishment requires consistent choice. Every day, moments arise where the mind wants to replay the event, assign blame, or imagine different outcomes. Each moment offers an opportunity to practice acceptance, redirect attention, and act intentionally. Repetition strengthens mental resilience. Over months and years, a person cultivates the ability to honor the reality of loss, while maintaining agency, emotional energy, and focus on life's opportunities. Mastering this process produces profound benefits. Emotional clarity stabilizes, energy is preserved for meaningful engagement. Relationships improve. Focus returns to present and future goals. Life is no longer dominated by shadows of past setbacks. The mind experiences freedom, growth accelerates, because attention is no longer imprisoned by past events. The body responds with reduced stress, improved sleep, and more vitality. Accepting loss, without converting it into lifelong punishment, becomes a practice of empowerment, resilience, and intentional living, producing a life that is not defined by what was lost, but by what is built, experienced, and pursued, moving forward.
Chapter 5. Drop the habit of replaying conversations alone. Replaying conversations in your mind is a habit that consumes more energy than most people realize. It often begins as a way to process what was said, to prepare for the next time someone might speak, or to analyze whether the words used were correct or appropriate. At first it seems harmless, it feels productive, but over time it becomes a mental trap. The conversation has ended, the other person has moved on, and yet the mind keeps the dialogue alive, replaying it repeatedly like a loop that cannot be stopped. The body reacts every time the memory surfaces. Heart rate may increase, muscles tense, and the chest may tighten. The mind convinces you that processing it over and over is necessary, but in reality it only prolongs stress, steals focus, and reduces clarity. Many people replay conversations because of unresolved emotions. Anger, hurt, embarrassment, or frustration demands attention. The mind thinks it can solve the problem by going over it again and again. Sometimes the person imagines alternative responses or rehearses what they should have said differently. Every replay feels like preparation, but it is actually feeding tension. Rehearsing responses to people who are not present is a form of self-inflicted stress. Energy that could be used to act in the present is consumed by events that cannot be changed. This habit creates a cycle where mental fatigue becomes normal and focus is scattered. Breaking this habit begins with awareness. Notice when a conversation surfaces in your mind. Pay attention to what triggers it. It may be a sound, a place, a social media post, or even a thought that reminds you of the interaction. Observe your physical reactions as well. Tension, shallow breathing, and elevated heart rate are signals that your nervous system is responding to old events as if they are happening now. Recognizing these triggers is the first step toward interrupting the loop. Awareness is not judgment, it is recognition that the mind is replaying unnecessarily. Once aware, intentional interruption is necessary. Simply noticing the pattern is not enough. Actively redirect attention to the present moment. Engage the senses, look at the environment around you. Focus on sounds, sights, or textures that are immediate and real. Physically moving your body can also help. Stand, walk, or stretch. Shifting physical energy sends a signal to the nervous system that the old conversation is not occurring in reality. Each deliberate interruption weakens the connection between the trigger and the automatic replay, gradually retraining the mind. Replacing the habit with constructive action is equally important. The mind seeks to engage in replay because it feels the need to solve or process the conversation. Give it productive alternatives. Write down insights from the interaction that are actionable. Practice communication skills by preparing for real future conversations, not imagined repeats of past ones. Engage in tasks that require focus. Reading, exercising, planning, or creating provides mental space for growth rather than wasted repetition. Each replacement strengthens neural pathways that favor present engagement over obsessive reflection. Acceptance plays a role as well. Understand that not every interaction needs to be analyzed endlessly. People make mistakes, misunderstandings occur, and not every conversation carries lasting significance. Accept that some dialogues will remain unresolved, and that is part of life. Noticing this prevents the mind from grabbing onto trivial details as if they carry eternal importance. Emotional energy is preserved when the mind is allowed to release unnecessary fixation. Acceptance does not mean apathy, it means choosing where attention is applied. Forgiveness supports this process. If the conversation involved conflict, tension, or hurt, holding resentment prolongs replay. Forgiveness is a tool to free mental energy, not a favor to the other person. Letting go of grudges prevents the mind from replaying interactions as a means of feeding anger or resentment. Forgiveness, when applied genuinely, allows clarity, reduces stress, and diminishes the habitual pull of past conversations. Self-forgiveness is particularly vital if you replay interactions to criticize your own words or behavior. Letting go of self-criticism breaks the cycle of obsessive reflection. Mindfulness is another powerful practice. Observing thoughts without engaging allows the mind to notice the replay as it arises without feeding it. Label the thought, This is a memory of a conversation, not a present event. Recognize the urge to intervene mentally and redirect attention to the present. Over time, mindfulness diminishes the frequency and intensity of replayed conversations. Mental energy is conserved and focus shifts to tasks that actually matter. Mindfulness builds resilience against mental habits that drain emotional resources. Setting boundaries with yourself is important for long-term change. Allocate specific times for reflection, if necessary, such as journaling after interaction. Outside these periods, consciously refuse to replay conversations. Boundaries signal to the mind that there is a limit to rumination. Just as physical space needs boundaries for rest and productivity, mental space requires limits to prevent unnecessary occupation by past events. These boundaries foster discipline, presence, and clarity, reducing the dominance of mental loops. Gratitude provides balance. Shifting focus to positive aspects of life, people or experiences, reduces attention given to past conversation. The mind cannot maintain tension over old dialogues while fully engaged in acknowledgement of current value and support. Gratitude changes the lens through which events are perceived, making it easier to release unnecessary mental engagement with past words. This shift also strengthens emotional resilience and improves mental stability. Observing patterns reinforces understanding. Notice which types of conversations are most frequently replayed. Identify triggers, themes, or individuals that consistently spark the loop. Awareness of patterns allows proactive strategies, such as preparing differently for future discussions, choosing less reactive engagement, or implementing stress-reducing techniques in advance. Recognizing recurring mental loops prevents them from becoming automatic and entrenched. Physical health complements mental training. Sleep, nutrition, and exercise influence emotional regulation. Fatigue amplifies the tendency to replay past interaction. When the body is rested and nourished, the mind is more capable of focusing on the present and interrupting habitual thought patterns. Breath control and posture adjustments provide immediate relief when a conversation resurfaces, signaling to the nervous system that threat has passed and presence is required. Perspective reduces the perceived importance of replayed interaction. Ask yourself whether continuing to analyze this conversation will affect life outcomes, decisions, or relationships. Often the answer is no. Perspective allows prioritization of attention, directing energy toward matters that produce tangible results. Repeated application of perspective trains the mind to focus on meaningful events rather than endlessly revisiting what cannot be changed. Social support accelerates progress. Sharing experiences, frustrations, or lessons with trusted individuals reduces the mental need to rehearse conversations alone. Supportive dialogue provides feedback, validation, and perspective, minimizing solitary rumination. Others can offer viewpoints that disrupt obsessive loops and reinforce constructive thinking. Social engagement also helps confirm which interactions require attention and which can be released, providing structure for mental energy management. Visualization strengthens mental control. Imagine responding differently in future interactions, or imagine letting the conversation go entirely. Mental rehearsal of calm, detached responses conditions the brain to handle real-life situations with confidence. Visualization creates a sense of preparedness without the physical and emotional cost of repetitive solo replay. The mind gradually learns that understanding, resolution, or performance does not require continuous rehearsal. Releasing replayed conversations fosters emotional stability. Energy previously spent on repetitive thought becomes available for action, creativity, and growth. Focus improves and the mind develops clarity. The body responds with reduced tension, improved sleep, and less stress. Relationships benefit because interactions occur in the moment, rather than filtered through obsessive past reflections. Life becomes more present-oriented, productive, and satisfying.
Repetition and consistency are crucial. Every time the mind attempts to replay an interaction, conscious intervention strengthens new patterns. Habitual loops weaken, while present-focused pathways grow stronger. Over weeks and months, the default response shifts from mental replay to constructive engagement. Mastery of this habit provides a foundation for managing other intrusive thought patterns and enhancing emotional resilience. Self-compassion is critical. People often replay conversations while criticizing themselves for perceived errors, missed opportunities, or poor wording. Compassionate recognition of human fallibility prevents the escalation of replay into mental punishment. Accepting imperfection allows release, enabling learning without prolonged distress. Emotional energy is preserved and redirected toward meaningful action rather than wasted on self-recrimination. Over time, dropping the habit of replaying conversations leads to profound benefits. Attention becomes fully available for the present. Productivity increases. Relationships deepen because the mind is engaged in listening and responding, rather than rehearsing past words. Emotional regulation strengthens, reducing stress and fatigue. The mind gains control over attention, shaping experiences rather than being shaped by memories of dialogue. Energy is redirected to creation, problem-solving, and intentional living, producing tangible results in personal, professional, and emotional spheres. Finally, mastering this habit creates lasting freedom. The mind learns that conversations, once concluded, do not require endless mental processing. Emotional energy is liberated, clarity becomes habitual, and presence becomes natural. Life becomes less reactive and more intentional. The person develops resilience, focus, and composure, cultivating a mental environment where growth, decision-making, and engagement occur without the drain of repetitive, solitary rehearsals of past interactions. Releasing this habit empowers a life that is controlled, purposeful, and fully alive.
Chapter 6. Walk away sooner from patterns that hurt repeatedly. Patterns of pain are easier to recognize than they are to escape. Many people stay in situations, relationships, or habits that repeatedly hurt them because familiarity disguises harm. The mind rationalizes, hoping things will change this time, or that circumstances are different now. Yet, the evidence often shows a consistent repetition of disappointment, frustration, or emotional pain. Ignoring this repetition keeps the body tense, the heart heavy, and the mind restless. Each cycle reinforces the expectation that pain is inevitable. Energy is drained anticipating harm, defending against it, or trying to negotiate with it. The first step toward freedom is acknowledging that recurring harm is not a necessary part of life. Pain repeated is a signal, not a destiny. Recognizing patterns requires honesty and clarity. Examine recurring situations with full attention. Identify behaviors, environments, or people that consistently trigger stress, frustration, or emotional upset. Often, the patterns are subtle at first, small irritations or disappointments that accumulate over time. The mind tends to rationalize, minimizing severity or convincing itself that this time will be different. Awareness of repetition demands courage because it confronts denial and challenges habitual coping mechanisms. Only by observing the repetition without bias can a person prepare to act effectively. Once patterns are identified, the next step is understanding consequences. Every repeated harmful interaction reduces emotional resilience, diminishes energy, and erodes self-esteem. The mind constantly anticipates disappointment, creating anxiety even in neutral moments. Sleep may be restless, concentration disrupted, and mood affected. The body responds to habitual stress with elevated tension, heart rate, and stress hormones. The longer harmful patterns persist, the more entrenched they become in both mind and body. Understanding the cost of staying clarifies why action is necessary. Walking away is often resisted because of fear, attachment, or obligation. The mind imagines negative outcomes such as loneliness, conflict, or regret. Emotional dependence on the familiar reinforces inaction. Habits of endurance convince a person that suffering is normal or unavoidable. Recognizing these mental barriers allows conscious intervention. Fear is often exaggerated, and imagined consequences outweigh actual experience. Observing fear without letting it dictate action allows decision-making grounded in reality, not in habitual anxiety. Setting personal boundaries supports walking away. Boundaries define what is acceptable and what is not. They protect energy, maintain dignity, and provide a framework for action. Without boundaries, the mind becomes entangled in repeated harm, rationalizing compromise or negotiating with situations that consistently hurt. Boundaries create clarity about limits and expectations. They reduce mental conflict, increase confidence, and make decisive action possible. Establishing firm limits allows the mind to act rather than remain passive in harmful cycles. Emotional regulation strengthens the ability to leave repetitive harm. When faced with triggering patterns, the body often reacts with tension, agitation, or anxiety. These responses can cloud judgment and delay action. Practicing calming techniques, such as controlled breathing, grounding, or focused attention, reduces immediate stress and enhances clarity. Calmness provides the space needed to make intentional choices rather than reactive ones. Emotional regulation allows one to act from strategy and awareness rather than impulse or fear. Self-reflection is an essential tool. Reflect on why patterns were tolerated and what prevented action in the past. Consider decisions, expectations, and beliefs that reinforced endurance. Acknowledge internal resistance without self-criticism, and use insight to guide future choices. Reflection consolidates learning, strengthens resolve, and prevents repeating the same passive pattern. Each experience becomes an opportunity for growth and strategic adjustment rather than an ongoing trap. Observation of outcomes supports decisive action. Consider the results when patterns were allowed to continue. Examine how energy was spent, how confidence was affected, and how relationships or productivity were diminished. Contrast these outcomes with the potential benefits of walking away. Freedom, restored energy, clarity, and emotional stability. Visualizing the benefits of detachment strengthens motivation. The mind begins to associate action with reward rather than loss, reducing hesitation. Preparation enhances success. Leaving a harmful pattern often requires practical steps. Financial stability, alternative relationships, or structured plans for change support action. Anticipating challenges prepares the mind to act decisively without panic or delay. Practical planning reduces perceived risk and reinforces confidence. When action is structured, the mind is less likely to retreat into doubt or indecision. Preparation transforms courage into strategy, producing consistent progress. Mindset shifts reinforce behavior change. Understand that enduring repeated harm is not a virtue. Endurance does not equate to strength or morality. True strength is the courage to protect one's emotional and physical well-being. Reframing endurance as unnecessary suffering frees the mind from self-imposed obligations to tolerate harm. Each decision to act decisively strengthens self-respect, confidence, and resilience. Gratitude enhances perspective during transition. While leaving harmful patterns, attention often fixates on loss, regret, or fear of change. Actively acknowledging supportive aspects of life, friendships, skills, opportunities, grounds the mind in stability. Gratitude reduces anxiety, strengthens emotional resilience, and directs energy toward constructive action. The mind recognizes that leaving harm does not erase value or opportunity. Life contains abundant resources, and energy can be redirected toward growth and fulfillment. Support networks provide reinforcement. Trusted friends, mentors, or advisors offer perspective, encouragement, and accountability. Social reinforcement validates decisions, mitigates isolation, and reduces the tendency to return to old patterns. Observing how others navigate similar challenges provides practical models and inspiration. Support enhances courage and prevents regression into familiar but harmful behaviors. Visualization strengthens commitment. Mentally rehearsing leaving harmful situations prepares the mind for real action. Imagine walking away calmly, confidently, and intentionally. Visualize managing consequences with composure and clarity. This rehearsal builds neural pathways that support proactive behavior, reducing hesitation when opportunity for action arises. Repeated visualizations strengthens readiness, making action a natural response rather than a stressful leap into the unknown. Perspective maintains clarity. Recognize that the mind often exaggerates consequences, creating imagined scenarios that deter action. Assess situations objectively, considering evidence and probability rather than fear-driven speculation. This cognitive clarity reduces indecision and builds trust in one's judgment. Perspective also helps in maintaining empathy without attachment, allowing recognition of others' behaviors without taking responsibility for their choices or reactions. Practicing detachment is critical. Emotional attachment to harmful patterns often prolongs tolerance. Release does not mean indifference, it means acknowledging reality without clinging. Detachment strengthens resolve and prevents the mind from creating narratives that justify staying. It reduces rumination and preserves energy for forward movement. Each practice of detachment reinforces the habit of acting decisively in alignment with well-being. Action is essential. Knowledge, awareness, and preparation are valuable, but without execution, patterns continue. Walking away must be tangible and intentional. Leaving a job, ending a relationship, or breaking a habit requires commitment. Hesitation often leads to regression. Decisive movement breaks repetition, reinforces boundaries, and demonstrates to the mind and body that harm will no longer dictate behavior. Each act of walking away strengthens the neural pattern that prioritizes self-preservation and growth. Mindful observation after leaving is important. Notice changes in energy, mood, and mental clarity. Reflect on improvements in focus, productivity, and emotional stability. These observations reinforce behavior and motivate continued action against future harmful patterns. The mind links positive outcomes to decisive behavior, strengthening adaptive habits over time. Reinforcing self-respect ensures sustainability. Leaving harmful patterns communicates to oneself that personal well-being is a priority. This internal message strengthens identity, self-worth, and resilience. Each decision to protect oneself reinforces a sense of competence and authority over life circumstances. The mind internalizes the principle that harm is not a required condition for growth or survival. Consistency builds mastery. Walking away once is a step, but repeated recognition and response to harmful patterns establishes lifelong habit. Each intervention strengthens confidence, reduces tolerance for unnecessary pain, and fosters clarity of judgment. Over time, the mind develops a default expectation. When harm repeats, action is taken. This expectation reduces emotional suffering and enhances personal control. Health benefits are evident. Chronic exposure to repetitive harm generates stress, anxiety, and tension. Walking away restores physiological balance, lowers stress hormone levels, improves sleep, and increases energy. Physical well-being reinforces emotional clarity, creating a feedback loop of resilience and strength. The body and mind are aligned, supporting purposeful, deliberate choices rather than reactive endurance. Long-term freedom emerges from consistent application. The mind becomes skilled at recognizing harmful repetition quickly. Emotional energy is preserved. Focus is directed toward growth.
opportunities, and meaningful relationships. Life becomes more intentional, less reactive, and more productive. The cycle of habitual harm is replaced with strategic action and self-protection. Energy once consumed by unnecessary suffering is redirected toward achievement, clarity, and emotional stability. Ultimately, walking away sooner from patterns that hurt repeatedly is an act of courage, wisdom, and self-respect. It requires awareness, honesty, preparation, emotional regulation, and decisive action. It strengthens identity, reinforces boundaries, and improves mental and physical health. Each instance builds confidence, reduces tolerance for unnecessary suffering, and preserves energy for meaningful engagement in life. Mastering this habit transforms experiences from repetitive pain into opportunities for growth, clarity, and fulfillment. Freedom is achieved not by waiting for circumstances to improve, but by taking intentional steps to protect the self, ensuring that life is guided by choice rather than habitual harm.
Chapter 7. Forgive yourself for coping the only way possible. Most people live with a quiet weight that they rarely admit out loud. It sits in the chest, whispers in the mind, and lingers in the back of every decision. That weight is often the result of self-blame. The mind replays mistakes, missteps, and moments of weakness, convincing itself that it should have acted differently, should have been stronger, smarter, or better. Every human being faces situations where survival, emotion, or circumstance dictated a certain response. People cope the only way they know how at that moment. Yet the mind often punishes itself for having done exactly what it could. Forgiveness begins with recognizing that coping strategies are not failures. They are attempts at navigating life with the tools, knowledge, and emotional resources available at the time. Coping mechanisms are diverse and complex. Some are obvious, like avoiding confrontation, staying silent, or withdrawing from relationships. Others are subtle, like overworking, people-pleasing, or numbing emotional pain. At the time of action, the mind justifies these behaviors as necessary. They are strategies to survive or manage intense stress. Looking back, it is easy to label these actions as wrong, weak, or insufficient. The mind often exaggerates past errors, creating a narrative of failure that overshadows learning. Forgiving oneself begins with an honest acknowledgement that these strategies were protective, adaptive, and often unavoidable in the context of knowledge and experience. Self-forgiveness requires understanding context. Human behavior is shaped by past experiences, upbringing, trauma, and environmental pressures. Judgments made in one state of mind cannot be fairly measured by another, more informed perspective. Recognizing the limitations of past knowledge allows the mind to separate the act from the identity. Mistakes do not define the whole person. They are specific events that, when observed objectively, can provide insight without consuming emotional energy. Contextual awareness creates mental space to release blame and build clarity. Emotional acceptance is critical. People often suppress regret, shame, or guilt because it feels uncomfortable to confront these emotions. Suppression, however, traps energy and perpetuates internal punishment. Allow feelings to surface fully and examine them without judgment. Recognize that guilt or shame is often the mind signaling awareness of values and growth, not an indictment of worth. Acceptance allows the emotion to exist temporarily without dictating identity or future action. Emotional presence transforms energy from stagnation into understanding. The mind's tendency to replay past coping decisions intensifies self-criticism. People create imagined scenarios of what could have been done differently, exaggerating consequences and assigning moral failure to natural responses. This mental rehearsal is counterproductive. Awareness interrupts these cycles. Observe the impulse to criticize without acting on it. Notice the sensations in the body, the tension, the shallow breathing, the tightness in the chest, and remind yourself that the moment has passed. The choice to stop judgment in the present frees energy for reflection and growth, rather than punishment. Compassion towards self builds resilience. Understand that every human, without exception, acts imperfectly at times. Decisions are made with limited information, emotions fluctuate and priorities shift. Self-compassion acknowledges humanity rather than condemns it. Speaking internally with kindness, acknowledging effort and validating emotion, reduces mental friction. Compassion does not erase mistakes, but diminishes their emotional weight. It replaces endless criticism with constructive evaluation and understanding. Reflection can be productive when oriented toward growth rather than blame. Analyze past coping strategies and ask practical questions. What was the outcome? What worked? What caused harm? What can be applied differently now? Reflection becomes a tool for insight and preparation for future decisions. It transforms mistakes into lessons, converting energy that might fuel self-punishment into strategic knowledge. This deliberate approach prevents the mind from remaining trapped in regret while fostering agency and learning. Acceptance of personal limits strengthens forgiveness. At the time of action, emotional, cognitive, or physical resources may have been insufficient to handle circumstances differently. Recognizing limits reduces unrealistic expectations. The mind often judges past actions with standards only achievable retrospectively. Acceptance allows the individual to acknowledge effort, survival, and intent, rather than punishing the absence of perfection. Emotional energy is released from unrealistic self-demands. Boundaries also support self-forgiveness, protecting mental space from ongoing self-criticism or external judgment reinforces the practice. Avoid engaging in conversations or media that amplify guilt unnecessarily. Limit exposure to reminders that fuel self-recrimination. Boundaries maintain focus on growth, present action, and recovery, ensuring that past coping decisions do not continue to dominate mental and emotional energy. Gratitude shifts perspective from deficiency to recognition. Identify ways past coping, even if imperfect, served a purpose. Perhaps it preserved relationships, maintained health, or allowed survival through difficult circumstances. Acknowledging these contributions balances the mind's focus and reduces the intensity of self-criticism. Gratitude highlights resilience, resourcefulness, and intention, reframing past action in a constructive light. Behavioral adaptation reinforces forgiveness. Learning alternative coping strategies prevents recurrence of situations where self-blame dominates. Practicing emotional regulation, communication, and decision-making skills enhances confidence in current and future responses. The mind experiences progress, which validates forgiveness and diminishes the need for continued punishment. Skill development transforms regret into proactive competence, strengthening identity and agency. Mindfulness enhances ongoing awareness. Observe impulses to criticize without engagement. Notice thoughts arising about past coping, and label them as memories or reflections, rather than present judgments. Mindfulness creates a buffer between stimulus and reaction, preventing automatic cycles of guilt or shame. Over time, the mind strengthens its capacity to acknowledge past actions without allowing them to dominate current emotional state. Social support fosters reinforcement. Trusted individuals can provide perspective, validate experiences, and model compassionate self-reflection. Sharing insights or feelings without fear of judgment reduces isolation, encourages honesty, and enhances emotional resilience. Observing others who practice self-forgiveness provides practical examples, reinforcing the belief that release of self-criticism is achievable and sustainable. Visualization strengthens internal acceptance.
Mentally rehearse responding to past actions with understanding and compassion rather than judgment. Imagine reviewing events and acknowledging limitations, intent and effort. Visualization prepares the mind to replace automatic cycles of self-criticism with conscious recognition, reinforcing constructive emotional patterns. Over time, visualization creates habitual internal dialogue that prioritizes learning and energy preservation over punishment. Perspective reframes the significance of past coping. Most errors or imperfect actions are temporary, context-specific, and not determinative of long-term identity or success. Shifting focus from negative assessment to broader understanding reduces emotional intensity. Recognize that life's trajectory is shaped by continuous growth, not isolated missteps. The mind gradually internalizes that past coping was part of a process, not a permanent statement of inadequacy. Forgiveness also strengthens relationships. Self-blame often projects onto interactions with others, causing defensiveness, withdrawal, or overcompensation. Releasing internal judgment fosters clarity in communication, reduces projection, and improves relational engagement. Emotional balance achieved through self-forgiveness produces healthier, more authentic connections, reinforcing personal stability and life satisfaction. Time is a vital component. Immediate self-forgiveness may be challenging. Persistent practice is required. Daily acknowledgement, reflection, and conscious redirection gradually recalibrate the mind's response to past actions. Neural pathways associated with automatic self-criticism weaken, while those supporting compassion, insight, and perspective strengthen. Over weeks and months, habitual response shifts from internal punishment to constructive evaluation. Health benefits emerge as mental energy is liberated. Self-blame generates stress, elevated heart rate, and tension. Releasing judgment improves sleep, focus, mood, and physiological resilience. The body reflects the mind's increased stability, producing a feedback loop where emotional well-being supports cognitive clarity, decision-making, and proactive behavior. Energy once consumed by punishment becomes available for action, creativity, and engagement. Consistency solidifies habit change. Each time the mind attempts to criticize, consciously applying awareness, compassion, and perspective strengthens the pathway of forgiveness. Repetition transforms occasional practice into default mental pattern, reducing stress and enhancing agency. The mind learns that coping in the past was necessary and survival-driven, while current energy is better directed toward present and future challenges. Forgiveness is also liberating. Carrying guilt and judgment about past coping reduces freedom to act, think, and create. When self-compassion replaces criticism, the mind experiences clarity, energy, and stability. Attention is redirected toward productive endeavors, relationships, and growth. Freedom from punishment produces confidence, emotional resilience, and increased ability to respond effectively to life's challenges. Integration of learning from past coping ensures sustainable growth. Review behaviors, identify insights, and implement strategies to strengthen future responses. Each success reinforces the validity of forgiving oneself, reducing the probability of reverting to self-criticism. Integration converts past mistakes into tools for development rather than sources of ongoing suffering. Ultimately, forgiving oneself for coping the only way possible is an act of wisdom, compassion, and empowerment. It requires awareness, reflection, emotional presence, and repeated practice. It releases energy previously consumed by self-blame, strengthens resilience, and enhances clarity. The mind becomes capable of acknowledging human limitation without punishment. Relationships, productivity, and emotional stability improve. Life becomes intentional and forward-focused. By releasing guilt and judgment for past coping, a person cultivates freedom, growth, and fulfillment, transforming past survival strategies into lessons that fuel future success rather than anchors of regret.
Chapter 8. Let go before resentment becomes your daily mood. Resentment is a quiet but heavy force that gradually takes over life if left unchecked. It begins with a single slight, a moment of unfairness, or a decision by someone else that causes frustration or hurt. At first, it is just a flicker of irritation, easy to dismiss. The mind holds onto it like a mental note, thinking it is temporary. Yet over time, that note grows into a collection of unresolved emotions. Each time the event is remembered, the feelings intensify, feeding a sense of injustice. The body responds as if the hurt is happening again, producing tension in the chest, tightness in the shoulders, and heaviness in the stomach. Breathing becomes shallow, posture stiffens, and energy is drained without conscious awareness. Resentment begins to color thoughts, words, and actions, even influencing unrelated situations. It transforms into a habitual state of mind that feels permanent. Many people allow resentment to grow because they confuse holding on to it with maintaining control. They believe that by ruminating on wrongs, they will prevent similar harm, teach a lesson, or gain justice. Yet resentment rarely produces clarity or positive outcomes. Instead, it occupies a mental space, consumes emotional energy, and distorts perception. Every interaction is filtered through the lens of past wrongs. The mind constantly recalls perceived offenses, reinterprets events in a negative light, and predicts further injustice. Each replay reinforces anger, frustration, and bitterness. This habitual pattern becomes self-reinforcing, and without intervention, resentment solidifies into a default emotional state. Recognizing resentment as it arises is the first step toward release. Awareness is not judgment. It is noticing the sensation in the mind and body without allowing it to dictate behavior. Observe tension, racing thoughts, or irritability, and identify the trigger. Many people ignore early signs, allowing minor grievances to accumulate unchecked. Each unresolved slight adds weight, slowly creating a mood dominated by negativity. Awareness allows conscious intervention before resentment becomes ingrained. Observing thoughts without automatic reaction interrupts habitual mental patterns. The next step is evaluating the cost of resentment. Emotional energy devoted to past grievances is energy stolen from present engagement, creativity, relationships, and personal growth. Chronic resentment increases stress hormones, affects sleep, reduces concentration, and impairs decision-making. Physical health declines as the nervous system remains in a heightened state of tension. The mind becomes increasingly reactive, interpreting neutral situations as threats. By assessing the tangible and invisible cost of holding on to resentment, motivation to release it grows. Understanding that resentment is a self-inflicted burden clarifies why letting go is essential. Forgiveness, though often misunderstood, is central to this process. Forgiveness is not condoning behavior or forgetting harm. It is releasing the grip that past wrongs have on the mind. By forgiving, emotional energy is reclaimed, allowing clarity and focus on present and future priorities. Forgiveness transforms resentment from an anchor into a neutral observation. It does not erase memory, but changes how the memory affects the mind. Every moment spent dwelling in bitterness is an opportunity lost to practice release, healing, and forward movement. Boundaries prevent repeated harm while supporting release. Forgiveness does not require continued exposure to those who caused pain. Distinguish between letting go emotionally and permitting recurrence. Boundaries protect energy, create safe space, and reinforce intentional action. By separating emotional release from behavioral tolerance, the mind avoids conflating forgiveness with weakness. Clear limits provide structure that supports sustainable freedom from resentment. Mindful awareness enhances the process. Observe impulses to ruminate on perceived injustices. Notice physical tension, racing thoughts, or emotional agitation. Label thoughts without engaging, understanding that recalling past harm is not necessary for survival. Mindfulness interrupts the automatic reinforcement of resentment, creating mental space for conscious response. Regular practice builds resilience, enabling one to acknowledge hurt without allowing it to dictate mood or perception. Perspective shifts reduce intensity. Consider the broader context of events. People act based on their knowledge, experiences, and limitations, often unaware of the consequences of their actions. Recognizing that perceived offenses may not carry the weight imagined diminishes emotional intensity. The mind learns that not every slight warrants ongoing anger. Perspective allows focus on what truly matters, redirecting energy toward growth, contribution, and fulfillment, rather than punishment and bitterness. Self-compassion is critical. Resentment often intertwines with self-blame, frustration, or regret. Acknowledging one's own role without judgment prevents reinforcement of negative emotional loops. Accept that feelings of hurt are natural, and responding with understanding rather than harsh criticism fosters emotional stability. Compassion toward oneself reduces vulnerability to habitual resentment, increases clarity, and strengthens resilience. Physical practices support emotional release. Tension stored in muscles, shallow breathing, and postural stiffness often accompany resentment. Deliberate movement, deep breathing, and awareness of body sensations signal to the nervous system that danger has passed. Physical action complements mental intervention, reducing stress responses and creating a feedback loop that reinforces emotional release. Over time, the body aligns with conscious intention, supporting freedom from habitual bitterness. Visualization accelerates detachment. Mentally rehearse releasing grievances, imagining them as mental burdens that dissolve rather than persist. Picture moving forward without anger, approaching situations with neutrality and calm, and interacting with clarity. Repeated visualizations strengthens neural pathways that favor release over rumination. The mind gradually internalizes freedom as a natural response rather than an effortful choice. Social engagement provides reinforcement. Discussing experiences, seeking guidance, or simply spending time with supportive individuals validates release and reduces isolation. Social support confirms that letting go is possible and beneficial. Others' perspectives often provide clarity, reducing misinterpretation of past harm and reinforcing intentional emotional management. Constructive dialogue diminishes the internal echo chamber where resentment thrives. Action-oriented focus transforms energy. Replace time spent dwelling on perceived wrongs with tangible steps toward personal, professional, and relational growth. Concentrate on tasks, learning, or projects that produce measurable outcomes. Action redirects attention, solidifies presence, and reduces mental space available for bitterness. The mind shifts from fixation to productivity, experience, and engagement. Gratitude fosters perspective and resilience. Identify aspects of life that are positive, supportive, or growing despite past harms. Focusing on value and abundance reduces perceived scarcity created by resentment. Gratitude strengthens emotional balance, improves mood, and stabilizes the mind against relapse into habitual bitterness. Repeated practice rewires habitual thought patterns, reinforcing intentional emotional response. Time supports consolidation. Letting go is a process,
not a single act. Frequent moments arise when old resentments resurface. Each instance offers an opportunity to practice release, observation, and redirection. Patience prevents discouragement and reinforces the skill of managing habitual emotional patterns. Over weeks and months, repeated application transforms response into automatic stability rather than reactive fixation. Learning from experience solidifies freedom. Examine past resentment for patterns, triggers, and lessons. Identify how perception, expectation, or communication contribute. Integrate insights into future behavior, improving decision-making, emotional regulation, and interaction skills. Learning converts prior frustration into constructive strategy rather than emotional entrapment. Perspective on control is essential. Recognize that other people's actions are largely outside personal authority. Resentment often arises from attempting to control outcomes or assign moral weight to actions beyond influence. Accepting limits of control reduces intensity of emotional reaction and frees mental energy for areas where influence is real. Focus becomes strategic, grounded, and intentional. Consistency ensures mastery. Releasing resentment is reinforced each time the mind chooses observation, forgiveness, and constructive focus over rumination. Repetition strengthens neural pathways that favor freedom rather than habitual bitterness. Over time, release becomes instinctive. Mood stabilizes and energy allocation improves. Habitual resentment diminishes, replaced by intentional engagement with present circumstances. Health improves as a result. Chronic resentment elevates stress hormones, impairs sleep, and contributes to cardiovascular strain. Emotional release restores balance, improves physiological function, and increases energy level. Mind and body support each other in sustaining calm presence and clarity, enhancing overall quality of life. Freedom from resentment is reflected in mental sharpness, emotional stability, and physical well-being. Releasing resentment strengthens relationship. Interactions become more authentic, communicative, and responsive. Emotional neutrality reduces projection, defensive behavior, and reactive tension. Relationships no longer serve as mirrors of past harm, but as opportunities for engagement, growth, and connection. Freedom from habitual bitterness improves social stability and support networks. Integration of lessons prevents relapse. Recognize early signals of brewing resentment. Apply mindfulness, perspective, and action to interrupt escalation. Maintain boundaries, self-compassion, and gratitude as safeguards. Integration ensures that release is maintained over time, preventing minor grievances from solidifying into chronic emotional patterns. Repetition builds mastery and stabilizes mood consistently. Ultimately, letting go before resentment becomes daily. Mood is a conscious act of empowerment. It requires awareness, self-compassion, perspective, emotional regulation, and consistent application. Energy once consumed by anger is freed for clarity, action, and growth. Emotional freedom strengthens decision-making, relationships, and health. Life becomes focused on present experience rather than past injury. Mastery of this practice cultivates stability, intentionality, and resilience. By releasing resentment early, the mind, body, and spirit remain aligned, energized, and prepared to engage with life fully, without the burden of habitual bitterness shaping perception or action.
Chapter 9. Stop measuring self-worth through past outcomes. Too many people define themselves by what they have done in the past. They measure their worth based on achievements, failures, missed opportunities, or moments of perceived success. This creates a constant mental ledger, tracking wins and losses as if they represent the total value of a person. Every decision, mistake, or missed chance becomes a mark against identity. The mind convinces itself that past outcomes are permanent proof of capability, intelligence, or worthiness. The problem is that life is fluid, circumstances change, and human potential is not static. Past results are snapshots, not determinants. Yet, the mental habit of evaluating self-worth based on history keeps people stuck, anxious, and hesitant. Energy is wasted in self-judgment and fear of repeating mistakes rather than building skills, taking action, or embracing growth. This mental pattern often begins in childhood. People are conditioned to internalize praise and criticism. Achievements are celebrated, mistakes are criticized, and slowly the mind associates self-value with performance. As adults, this translates into a constant internal audit, asking, "Am I enough based on what I've done?" The problem is compounded because humans naturally compare themselves to others. Social media, professional environments, and personal relationships provide endless benchmarks. The mind interprets others' success as a reflection of personal deficiency. Self-worth becomes externalized, dependent on outcomes outside immediate control. This reliance on the past and external validation distorts perception and fosters chronic dissatisfaction. Awareness is the first step toward change. Notice when self-worth is being measured against past outcomes. Recognize the emotional reactions that arise: shame, pride, regret, or insecurity. Observe how these judgments influence behavior, choices, and mood. Awareness is not self-condemnation, it is acknowledgement. By noticing the habitual mental evaluation, space is created for intervention. Energy is no longer automatically tied to history, opening the possibility of deliberate redefinition. Understanding context is essential. Past outcomes reflect circumstances, knowledge, experience, and resources at the time. Success or failure is rarely absolute. Many external factors beyond personal control influence results. Recognizing this prevents over-identification with outcomes. Performance does not equate to worth. People can act with integrity, effort, and courage without achieving expected results. Worth resides in effort, growth, and character rather than in historical metrics. This shift from outcome-based evaluation to process-based understanding changes the internal dialogue from criticism to recognition of resilience. Emotional regulation strengthens this perspective. When the mind reacts to past outcomes with guilt, shame, or inflated pride, physiological responses occur: tension, racing heartbeat, and shallow breathing. Practice noticing these sensations and calming the nervous system. Controlled breathing, physical movement, or grounding techniques reduce the impact of past outcomes on current emotional state. Stabilizing the body allows the mind to assess past performance rationally rather than being hijacked by automatic judgments. Self-compassion is critical. People often criticize themselves relentlessly for perceived failures. Harsh judgment deepens the connection between outcomes and identity. Compassion involves acknowledging that mistakes are part of growth, limitations are natural, and effort is valid. Speaking internally with understanding reduces emotional friction and provides a foundation for reframing worth. Compassion shifts the focus from punitive self-evaluation to constructive insight. Reframing past outcomes is a practical tool. Instead of asking, "What does this failure say about me?" consider, "What does this teach me?" Shift attention from judgment to learning. Even unfavorable results provide information about decision-making, timing, preparation, and resilience. Lessons extracted from outcomes strengthen skills and guide future action. Mindset transitions from judgmental to strategic, converting historical experiences into tools for improvement rather than anchors of self-doubt. Detachment from results fosters freedom. Practice recognizing that outcomes are events, not reflections of inherent value. Celebrate effort and intention, independent of results. The mind gradually separates identity from performance. Each time the mind attempts to link self-worth to history, redirect focus to present capabilities, actions, and potential. Detachment reduces anxiety, restores energy, and promotes mental clarity. Mindfulness enhances this practice. Observe thoughts related to past outcomes as they arise. Label them without judgment and return focus to the present. Mindfulness interrupts automatic evaluation loops, reducing the frequency and intensity of self-worth fluctuation. With consistent practice, the mind learns that evaluation is optional, not mandatory, and that identity exists outside history. Perspective reinforces clarity. Consider that life is continuous, and outcomes are not static indicators of value. Success today does not guarantee worth, and failure yesterday does not diminish it. Each moment is an opportunity to act differently, learn and grow. Viewing life as ongoing progress, rather than a fixed record of past events, frees the mind from the burden of historical self-assessment. Behavior alignment strengthens belief in inherent worth. Act in ways that reflect values, integrity and effort, independent of outcome. Engaging in consistent practice, contributing to others, and taking responsibility for actions solidifies the sense of self. The mind internalizes identity through repeated behavior rather than fluctuating results. Identity becomes anchored in principles and effort, providing stability and reducing reliance on external metrics. Gratitude supports this transition. Recognize what has been accomplished, lessons learned, and opportunities available regardless of past outcomes. Focusing on growth, resilience, and experience creates balance, preventing obsession with success or failure. Gratitude fosters emotional stability and strengthens motivation, encouraging action based on potential rather than history. Social support reinforces perspective. Trusted individuals provide honest feedback, encouragement, and validation, independent of past performance. Sharing experiences reduces isolation and highlights that self-worth is not universally contingent on measurable results. Others' perspectives help normalize imperfections and contextualize achievements, reducing obsessive focus on historical outcomes. Visualization prepares the mind for present engagement. Mentally rehearse approaching challenges with focus, effort, and integrity, without preoccupation with past results. Visualize responding to situations from values and skills, rather than historical fear or expectation. Visualization trains the brain to operate from potential and strategy, rather than fixation on past outcomes, increasing confidence and reducing anxiety. Integration of learning consolidates freedom. Reflect on historical outcomes for insights and improvements, then release attachment to their emotional weight. Apply lessons to current decisions while maintaining identity independent of results. This practice transforms past experiences into tools for growth rather than sources of self-judgment, creating a mental environment conducive to creativity, resilience, and progress. Consistency builds lasting habit. Each time the mind attempts to tie worth to outcomes, apply awareness, perspective, and redirection. Repetition strengthens mental pathways that favor present-focused evaluation. Over time, identity becomes stable, resilient, and self-directed, independent of fluctuating achievements or failure. Consistent practice fosters emotional equilibrium and strategic engagement with life. Physical health complements mental effort. Fatigue and stress amplify tendencies to over-evaluate self-worth through past outcomes. Adequate sleep, nutrition, and exercise support cognitive clarity, emotional stability, and resilience. A well-regulated body allows the mind to disengage from habitual self-assessment and focus on present action, decision-making, and strategic growth. Perspective on time reduces obsession. Life is long,
and each moment contributes to ongoing development. Past outcomes are limited snapshots in a broader continuum. They are contextually bound and temporary. Maintaining this perspective reduces the disproportionate weight of history on self-perception, freeing energy to engage fully in current opportunities. Intentional focus enhances application, direct attention to actions, behaviors, and goals that produce meaningful outcomes today, rather than dwelling on past performance. Focused effort reinforces identity through achievement and contribution, independent of historical events. Action becomes the primary measure of engagement and growth, rather than the evaluation of prior results. Ultimately, stopping measurement of self-worth through past outcomes is a transformative practice. It requires awareness, reflection, compassion, perspective, and consistent application. Energy previously spent in self-judgment becomes available for present action, learning, and personal development. Identity stabilizes, emotional resilience improves, and decision-making becomes deliberate rather than reaction. Relationships benefit from authentic engagement rather than projection of past failures or successes. Freedom from the mental ledger allows focus on potential, action, and growth. Life becomes oriented toward contribution, clarity, and fulfillment. Mastery of this practice cultivates confidence, stability, and intentional living, enabling the mind to evaluate experience strategically without allowing history to dictate inherent value.
Chapter 10. Choose today without dragging emotional history forward. Every day carries the weight of opportunity, yet too often people step into it dragging yesterday's emotions, experiences, and regrets along for the ride. Memories of hurt, failure, disappointment, or fear create invisible chains that influence decisions, cloud judgment, and distort perception of what is possible today. Carrying emotional history forward changes how people respond to simple events. A neutral comment can trigger anger because of unresolved conflict from last week. A minor mistake can feel catastrophic because it mirrors failures from months or years ago. Energy that should be focused on the present is siphoned into past narratives. The mind rehearses old conversations, relives mistakes, and anticipates failures, all before today has truly begun. Each moment spent reliving the past diminishes clarity, reduces effectiveness, and drains emotional capacity. Choosing today requires a deliberate decision to separate current experience from historical weight, to step fully into the present without the burden of yesterday. The first step is awareness. Notice when the mind drifts into the past. Pay attention to emotional responses that are disproportionate to current events. Recognize tension, rapid heartbeat, shallow breathing, or mental agitation that arises from old experiences rather than immediate circumstances. Awareness creates a space to intervene rather than react automatically. Observing the pull of history without judgment allows one to step back and choose intentional focus. It is important to acknowledge that emotions from the past are valid, but need not dictate behavior in the present. By distinguishing past from present, the mind gains flexibility, control, and freedom to act intentionally. Acceptance is critical. People often resist releasing emotional history because it feels like abandoning memory or diminishing experience. The truth is that experiences shape wisdom, insight, and resilience, but they do not need to control current perception or behavior. Accept that the past happened exactly as it did, and that lessons exist without forcing them to linger as emotional weights. Emotional acceptance allows energy to be redirected toward present action, decision-making, and engagement. It prevents recurring cycles of regret, resentment, or self-criticism from contaminating today. The mind naturally seeks continuity, which can make emotional release difficult. The brain interprets unresolved events as ongoing threats. Each unresolved conflict perceived failure or emotional injury signals caution, prompting vigilance, defensiveness, or anxiety. This instinct can be useful for survival but counterproductive in daily life. Recognizing that the past is no longer a direct threat allows recalibration. Choosing today means signaling to the mind that while lessons exist, immediate circumstances are neutral unless acted upon. This cognitive framing reduces habitual reactivity and supports conscious decision-making. Forgiveness is a tool for release. Forgive oneself for past mistakes, and forgive others for actions that caused pain. Forgiveness is not about condoning behavior but freeing the mind from repetitive emotional loops. When forgiveness is practiced, the nervous system relaxes, tension decreases, and emotional energy is preserved for the present. Forgiveness is an act of empowerment, reclaiming control over attention, emotion, and action. It transforms the relationship with history, converting it from a source of control into a source of learning and clarity. Boundaries strengthen the ability to choose today. Protect emotional space from triggers that reinforce past pain. Limit engagement with reminders, environments, or individuals that perpetuate old patterns unnecessarily. Boundaries reinforce autonomy, giving the mind and body permission to focus on present priority. By controlling exposure to historical triggers, the mind experiences less distraction, fewer emotional relapses, and more energy for intentional action. Boundaries are not avoidance, they are conscious protection that facilitates engagement with life on current terms. Mindfulness deepens presence. Observe thoughts, sensations, and impulses as they arise. Recognize when attention drifts into historical grievances or imagined outcomes. Label these thoughts as past related and gently redirect focus to current reality. Mindfulness prevents automatic immersion in old emotional patterns. Each moment practiced strengthens the mind's capacity to remain in present experience without judgment or distraction. Consistency in mindfulness training builds a stable mental platform for clarity, decision-making, and emotional balance. Perspective provides clarity. Recognize that the past is complete and unchangeable, while today is dynamic and actionable. Decisions, behavior, and attention now have direct impact. The value of history lies in insight, not repetition. Shifting perspective from reactive remembrance to strategic awareness allows the mind to use history as guidance rather than authority. This reframing transforms emotional weight into practical wisdom, increasing focus and reducing unnecessary stress. Compassion towards self supports this transition. People often carry guilt, shame, or frustration into the present. Acknowledge these emotions without allowing them to dictate behavior. Treat yourself with understanding, recognizing that mistakes, regrets, and failures were part of growth. Self-compassion reduces internal conflict and mental friction, providing stability to engage with current circumstances fully. Compassion strengthens emotional resilience, allowing the mind to navigate present challenges without past interference. Reflection anchored in learning is productive. Review past events for lessons and insights, rather than dwelling in emotional re-experiencing. Determine what actions, strategies, or adjustments are valuable for the present. Reflection without emotional entanglement converts history into a toolkit for decision-making and growth. It prevents repetition of harmful cycles while retaining useful knowledge. Each instance of constructive reflection builds competence, clarity, and preparedness. Intentional action reinforces choice. Act in ways aligned with current priorities and values, independent of past outcomes. Set goals, take steps, and make decisions grounded in present circumstances. Each action directed by awareness of today strengthens the habit of engaging fully in the moment.
Action signals to the mind and body that the past no longer dictates behavior, creating feedback loops of confidence, focus, and clarity. Visualization supports mental rehearsal. Imagine navigating the day without interference from past mistakes or emotion. Picture responding calmly, decisively, and intentionally. Mentally rehearse encounters, challenges, and tasks with clarity and focus. Visualization trains neural pathways to favor present-oriented behavior, reducing the likelihood of distraction by historical emotional patterns. Regular practice reinforces mental flexibility and presence. Gratitude redirects focus. Identify positive aspects of the current day, resources, relationships, or opportunities. Gratitude shifts attention from what was lost or failed to what is available and actionable now. This positive focus strengthens emotional balance, reduces rumination, and encourages engagement with present possibilities. Repeated application of gratitude solidifies a mindset oriented toward opportunity rather than residual regret. Social reinforcement strengthens habit. Engage with individuals who promote forward focus and perspective. Shared experience and dialogue reduce isolation, validate effort, and normalize the challenge of releasing emotional history. Observing others manage their past without letting it dominate present behavior provides practical models and motivation. Social support amplifies resilience, stabilizes emotion, and reinforces intentional engagement. Physical alignment enhances mental freedom. Stress, tension, and fatigue increase susceptibility to mental intrusion from past events. Maintain proper posture, practice deep breathing, and engage in physical activity to regulate energy. The body's state supports cognitive clarity, emotional stability, and effective decision-making. Physical awareness complements mental presence, creating coherence between body and mind in embracing today. Perspective on impermanence reinforces choice. Recognize that each moment is unique, unrepeatable, and complete in itself. Past mistakes or successes do not define the unfolding present. This awareness reduces attachment to history, enabling engagement with current opportunities without fear, regret, or overconfidence. Understanding the impermanence of all events fosters flexibility, reduces mental rigidity, and strengthens resilience. Consistency builds mastery. Each day that the mind is intentionally focused on current reality, the habit of forward presence strengthens. Repeated practice trains attention, reinforces emotional stability, and reduces susceptibility to historical interference. Over time, choosing today becomes automatic, producing a mindset of clarity, productivity, and emotional freedom. Health improves with mental clarity. Releasing past emotional burdens reduces stress hormones, tension, and mental fatigue. Restful sleep, increased energy, and physical relaxation result from sustained presence. Emotional liberation enhances decision-making, productivity, and interpersonal interaction, reinforcing the benefits of engaging fully with today rather than with history. Integration ensures sustainability. Combine awareness, acceptance, mindfulness, reflection, action, and social support into daily practice. Identify early signs of historical intrusion and apply intervention strategies immediately. Integration prevents regression and stabilizes emotional and cognitive patterns. Life becomes organized around active engagement, conscious choice, and present-focused behavior. Ultimately, choosing today without dragging emotional history forward is an act of deliberate empowerment. It requires awareness, acceptance, mindfulness, compassion, reflection, action, visualization, and consistency. Emotional and mental energy is liberated from repetitive cycles of regret, resentment, or fear. The mind and body align to engage fully with immediate opportunities, challenges, and relationships. Life becomes intentional, dynamic, and responsive. Mastering this practice transforms habitual distraction from the past into conscious creation of the present. By prioritizing today, mental clarity, emotional resilience, and personal growth flourish, ensuring each moment is approached with focus, energy, and freedom.